Thank you, Steve, for that lovely introduction, and I'd like to thank the committee for having me here today, especially for placing me after Asma and Dr. Abdall spoke. Makes my job a lot easier. I don't know what there is for me to say that they haven't said. My own personal story might be something I could share with you. I started this conversation earlier with some of the younger people, and I still have them in mind. So one of the things that Asma talked about was the notion of sincerity, and Ustaz Mahmoud, how he taught that we should think what we want, say what we think, do what we say, with one provision that it doesn't harm other people. And that's how he lived. And the sincerity by which he lived is, I think, manifest in his followers. So I'd like to just ask if all of the Mahmoods in the room would stand up. How many of you are? Everybody named Mahmoud after Ustaz Mahmoud, please stand up in the room. Some of them are gone? Okay. Okay, anybody stand, then help me here. Stand up if somebody in your family is named after Ustaz Mahmoud, named Mahmoud, then stand up. That'll make the point a little better. Okay? Thank you for the help. All right, I'll talk to them later for not being here for my talk. I would like the Amnas, this is Ustaz's wife's name, to stand up, or anybody who has a child named Amna after Ustaz Mahmoud, please stand up. Okay, thank you. And Ustaz's oldest daughter is Asma, and his other daughter is Sumaya. We could do the same thing with them. My only child is named Sumaya. So there's a reason for that. And it has to do with what Dr. Abdall was talking about, is that you're sold on the man before his ideas. You're sold on the man. And so when I arrived in Sudan, I had actually had a conversation with a colleague of mine at the University of Hawaii. He was actually a fellow student. I asked him, when I became a Muslim, he actually took me under his wing and taught me how to pray, how to fast. And then he told me he was going to Sudan, and would I like to come with him? And I said, sure. And the reason I spoke so quickly is because I saw something in his behavior and in the behavior of the other Sudanese at the University of Hawaii that I wanted to investigate. And what I saw in them was character. What I saw in them was conduct that I was looking for in other humans. So before we left for Sudan, I asked Salman another question, and I said, is there a teacher there that has a modern understanding of Islam? And the reason I asked that question was, I was born a Christian, and I started my own personal journey in Christianity, which led me to study Eastern religions. And I did yoga and Tai Chi, and I'm still right now practicing Qigong. And in that personal search, in my personal journey, there were certain realizations that I had come to. And I had been exposed to traditional Islam, and I had respect for it. I knew that it had a tremendous impact on the African American experience. I was very much moved also by Malcolm X. He was a person I looked up to for standing up to the worst side of America, and also to Muhammad Ali, who also took a very courageous stand, as most of you are aware, in giving up his heavyweight title when he was at the top of his game, on a moral principle that he wouldn't go fight in Vietnam because he felt the war was immoral and he had no reason to go. That position by an athlete was very rare. It was something no one had seen in America that I could think of. So I was impressed by these men, and both of them identified themselves as Muslims. And I had started to read a little bit about African American history and seen the connection between Islam and West Africa and so forth. So I'm impressed with the Sudanese, and I asked that question, and Salman said, yes, there's one man, and his name is, and he told me, Ustaz Mahmoud, and he said that I've read all his books. I think he might have been exaggerating, because there's a lot of them, but he said he had read all his books, and that he believed every word that he said. That's what he told me. I said, oh wow. I said, okay, can we meet him when we get there? And he said, yes. And 3 weeks after I had arrived in Sudan, I was at Ustaz's front door. And when I approached the front door, there was a calm around his students. And as I got introduced into his house, and as Asma explained, he only had 3 rooms in his house, dirt floor, no this, no that. I mean, he lived simply according to his philosophy. And so I'm sitting in his greeting room, and it starts to fill up. I'm talking about, you've got like some type of fire hazard going on in his house. There's no room for anybody. And I'm watching these grown men, many of them senior to me, I was 24 at the time, come into the room and sit down on the floor like this. I'm going, what are they waiting for, you know? And they kept filling up the floor, and then the women came in and they sat, and there was a type of, it was a type of politeness and a type of expectation just in these students that caught my attention. And then Ustaz entered, and it was like, oh, I see. I see what that was all about. I mean, he came into the room and just, he picked up everybody's spirit, and he just was so calm and so into his own skin. I mean, he was just so calm with himself, and so at peace with himself. It exuded. And so I was taken with the man when I first met him. Before I read anything, I said, I'll study under him for a while. And my intention originally was just to find out if Islam in Sudan had anything to do with this politeness I saw in the Sudanese in Hawaii. And many of you already know that what's going on in Sudan now is not reflective of Sudanese culture and Sudanese people. It has to do with that, I would say, almost Islamic colonialism that's taking over many parts of the world, and there's a superimposed system there in the north. And you're probably aware of that. But anyway, I had a chance to talk with him, and he asked me some questions about what would cause a person who was a Christian to come to Sudan looking for truth. And I was startled by the question, and I stopped and I thought about it, and I gave him my answer. I really just hadn't got all the answers I was looking for. And so he gave me his books translated in English to read, and I was back there within a couple of days, and I brought my bags with me after I read the second message of Islam in translation. I mean, that was just too much. The simplicity, the clarity, and the comprehensiveness of this ideology in a little pamphlet was just startling. And so I was, again, now impressed intellectually, as intellectual as you can be at 24, and emotionally with the movement. By the time I'm leaving his room, the saloon, it's time now for the brothers and sisters to return from book distribution. You saw them in some of the film. We would go out after our sunset prayer and distribute books on campuses and in the streets all over the Tri-Cities of Khartoum, Khartoum North, and then we would come back and we would report to Ustaz. We would be sitting in a room like this, and it was a very democratic process, and people who had something to say would speak, and everybody would listen, and if you had something to add and so forth. And it was a very powerful education in the Socratic method of critical thinking, is what he was taking us through. It was very well. When I left, and this was actually on the first day, when I left, the Hamla bus arrived, and first I could only hear it. And you heard them chanting Allah here, And so I'm walking outside the house, and it's very still. It's on a sort of quiet street at the end of the street. There's not a lot of noise. And I'm hearing something that sounds like singing. And as it gets closer and closer, I'm starting to make out something, and I can't really hear what it is, but my ear really is drawn to it. And then as I look up, this bus is coming, and all I see is white light coming out of the bus. And that's because all of the Republicans, like the sisters here, were wearing their white tobes, and the men, most of them, many of them, if not most of them, are wearing their jalabia and white imma. So there's all this light coming out of the bus, and then I realized that they're saying Allah. And I asked Salman, are these his students? You know, are these his students? And he said, yeah. I said, well, yeah, I was sold, even at another level right there. So I never did decide to go any further than Sudan once I got there. I started to say my intention was to go there, investigate that question I had, and then go study Arabic in Saudi Arabia. Until this day, I haven't set foot in Saudi Arabia. And
next year
I won't continue my next thought. I'll keep that one to myself. But my experience there caused me to stay there for 9 years. That wasn't my intention, of course, when I went. But it's like, you know, it says in the Bible that, I think it's something to the effect of, you know, religion is like covering, somebody can correct this, a treasure in a field, and then you go and sell all your belongings and buy that field. That's kind of how I felt about where I was. I mean, there was no reason to go anywhere once I was there. You know, the problem became, at that time, trying to live up to the standard that was being taught us and that was being exemplified by Ustaz Mahmoud. That was a task. And we all did the best we could at that. I can't really add a lot to what's been said about his character. The concept of transformation, though, I think is one just should pause on a moment. I can say personally that my own mother said I was a different person when I returned. Of course, I was 9 years older, but she meant that I had changed or transformed into someone who's different, and I hope to think better. And a large part of that is I was living in a community that was modeling its behavior on a teacher who was exemplary, and also who was directing us to imitate the Holy Prophet Muhammad, who was exemplary. And so we were in the best of all possible worlds with the best of all possible guides. And Ustaz Mahmoud's courage you saw. I mean, his sincerity you saw. The way he spoke, and I was in that first trial, the way he spoke to the judge, rocking calmly, and just telling him what he thought about that court, and that he wasn't going to participate in the court, was indicative of who he was. He would do no less. And he knew the verdict of the court before they knew what they were going to do. He told us, I mean, I'll share this with you, Ustaz Mahmoud and over 50 of the Republican brothers were incarcerated for 22 months, and the sisters for 9 months? For 9 months. Ustaz Mahmoud got out like on the 18th of December, and at that meeting he had with us that night, he planned a book that was released to get him rearrested and ultimately used as a pretext to execute him. He planned it the night he got out of jail. And the brothers that were incarcerated with him were asked, would you like, you've been, away from your families for almost 2 years. Would you like to go home and see them and come back and we start working on the book in a week? Or would you like to start now? And to the person, they said now. Let's start, let's write the pamphlet, we'll work on it. And the staff said, no, why don't you go home to your families, they haven't seen you. So they did, and by the time they returned, he had someone else working on the book, and the book was ready by Christmas, the 25th of December. And it was released that day. And we don't have to focus on they're not worth words, the people who executed it, really. They have their own issues to deal with. I wouldn't want to be them, I'll tell you that. But at present, I'm teaching at a college just north of Seattle, and I teach multicultural studies. And what I try to do in my classes is exemplify to my students, to the best of my ability, some of the qualities I learned from my father.